Oh, hello. Hi. You guys doing good? Feel good to be back in the DoubleTree? It's a little sweaty in here. I feel that. I just woke up sweating, and we got this incredible picnic. So I'm going to be doing that all day. You guys with me? It's going to be great. A little under a heat warning, but we're here for it. If I was going to title this sermon, I would title it like The Humble Learner. This is a theme in the book of Proverbs that you're going to hit again and again and again and again. It's going to talk to us about, our finances, our sexuality, how we should have relationships with one another. But one of the central running themes that comes up again and again and again is this idea of being someone who is just able to learn, being someone who's able to receive correction, being someone who's teachable. And I am a father, and I am with my son Silas regularly. And one of the things that you do as a father, is you're regularly trying to teach your kids things. And one of the things that happens is really early on, your kids are very young, and at the very beginning, there's this desire to learn, and so they want to show you how to do things. They want to show you how to do things. But what eventually kind of starts to happen is this. Kids get really independent really fast, right? And is this, should I go to the silver mic? Just keep going? Okay. Okay. If this keeps cutting out, just let me know and I'll go to a different one. So one of the things that happens with kids is that you're trying to teach them things. They become really independent really fast. And so they really quickly don't want you to correct them or instruct them. They just want to know how to do something right away, right? So my son Silas, he's 6 years old. This is a regular conversation we have. So yesterday we're playing catch, and Silas, he just has this glove that's too small for him, baseball glove, on the wrong hand. So he's jammed his left hand into this right-handed glove, and he's trying to catch with it. And I'm like, oh, buddy, that's on the wrong hand, Very gentle, very caring, just oh, hey, this is on the wrong hand. Let's switch it. And he's like, I know, Dad. I know it's on the wrong, I know. And I'm like, do you though? I don't know if you do, right? And so this is actually a recurring phrase that Silas uses all the time with us. And we see him doing something that's not, and you're kind of watching it, and you want them to be independent, so you want them to learn how to kind of solve problems on their own. But at some point you come in hey, do you want me to help you know how this thing works? And in Silas is the recurring thing is just I know, don't help me. I got this. I'm good. I am totally fine. And it's really interesting. It's kind of funny because all kids kind of do this. But as a father, there's this tension that happens in my heart because I'm watching something grow in my 6-year-old son that I know if this continues to grow, this is actually going to significantly hold him back in the game of life. If he is not able to receive instruction, if he views any kind of correction or teaching as an assault on his identity and personhood, he's actually going to become a very unteachable person who's hard to correct. And that will actually hold him back from some of the very best things in life. And so me as a father, I'm watching this happen, and there's this tension I feel because I'm seeing something grow in my son that I see something growing in me and in the people around me. And it's this thing in us where we, more than wanting to be the right kind of person someday, even more than that, we want to be okay today now. We want to be good. And this holds us back from so many things, and Proverbs talks about this. It says there's two kind of different ways that you can respond to correction. And I'm just going to read this verse again. This is going to be kind of our home base for today. We got a few other verses I'll read, but this is the central one. Proverbs 9, 7 through 9. It says, whoever corrects a scoffer gets himself abuse. He who reproves a wicked man incurs injury. So do not reprove a scoffer, he will hate you. But if you reprove a wise man, he will love you. Give instruction to a wise man, he will be wiser still. Teach a righteous man, and he will increase in learning. So here's kind of where we're going, a few different things. First is this, there's a picture of the wise Proverbs is trying to give us. And this picture kind of turns into a mirror that kind of investigates our own hearts. And then there's this information, or this invitation to a deeper belief in the gospel and a deeper transformation that I think Jesus wants for us to experience. And so this is what he says in verse 8. It's kind of the central verse. He says, do not reprove a scoffer, or he will hate you. So he uses this word reprove. Anyone regularly use that word reprove? Yeah, no one in this room does. Okay, so reprove is from the Hebrew, this word, this yakha, and I'm saying that as well as I possibly can, being someone who is extremely white. Yakha is like this kind of, glottal sound on the end of it. It's this idea of just bringing correction to someone, but in like a gentle but pointed way. And so it's to teach someone something. It's this kind of category word for pointing out something that they are doing, that they shouldn't be doing, or something that they should be doing that they're not doing. It's a gentle confrontation, but it is a confrontation, and it is correction. And here's the thing, this is something most people do not like. How many of you are like, I love being confronted about things I'm not very good at? How many of you are like, that's just my favorite day? You're like, one person's like, I love that, right? Here's one of the greatest tensions in our lives is this. In order to become the kind of people God wants us to be, we actually have to transform from who we are today to who we're going to be in the future. Like a transformation needs to take place. This is called sanctification, right? We're not today who God fully intends for us to be in the future. And so this means that we're going to need to be corrected at many times, in many different ways, by many different kinds of people. This is the way God works. God doesn't just give us a Bible and just as we kind of read the Bible, we see a truth claim and we kind of change according to it. Actually, a lot of the correction that happens in our lives from God actually happens in like the normal back and forth context with people. It's not just the Bible that speaks to us, it's people, it's situations, it's circumstances. And we need to be corrected in many ways, at many times, by many different people if we're going to become the kind of people God wants us to be. But here's what's hard. Until we actually are those people that God's making us into be, receiving correction is going to be very hard for us. So we need correction to become the kind of people God wants us to be, but until we are those kind of people, correction is going to be hard for us. And so it's interesting, becoming someone who's able to receive instruction, critique, correction, even becoming someone who values it is one of the defining things about becoming a person of wisdom. The Proverbs again and again and again is going to say, man, if there's like one central thing you can get right, it's this. One thing you get wrong, it's that. So there's two kinds of people. In Proverbs, we're told again and again, there's wise people and there's fools. It just kind of separates the world in this dichotomy. And fools, they're simple, they're naive. And the primary thing about them is they kind of live not according to the way the world really is, right? The wise, they live along the grain of the world. Their life is aligned with the way things are. And the fools, like when you live according to the life of a fool, you find ruin. And when you live a wise life, you tend to find prosperity. It's just someone who's kind of living along with how the world works tends to find a life of flourishing. But there's another character we get introduced to in the Proverbs, and this is where we're meeting this character, and it's the mocker. Or it's the scoffer. Your translation might say mocker, might say scoffer, but it's a character that comes up again and again in the Proverbs, and it's like a title for like a type of foolish person. It's like a category of foolish person. Fool is like the big category in the Proverbs that used again and again, but there's this idea of a scoffer that's not just simple. It's not just you don't kind of know things or you don't know the way the world works, but you are actually someone who's hostile to wisdom. It's a title that's used often. The scoffer has something in them that like actively resists correction and instruction. When wisdom comes to them, instead of seeing it and prizing it, they actually mock it and kind of scoff at it. A way to think of it is like this. A wise person, when wisdom comes to them, they look up at wisdom as something that can help them grow. And a scoffer looks down at wisdom as something that is beneath them and they don't need. And so we meet this character of a scoffer and a wise person, and there's this description of these two people. And here's what it says. It says, if you try to correct a scoffer, you will suffer abuse, Like you'll just, if this is like a consistent thing you're doing is trying to teach this person something, like you're just gonna be in a relationship where you kind of get abused. You're gonna incur injury. Trying to teach these people something is probably going to cost you something. And it says they will hate you. So to correct a scoffer, and it's using this kind of strong language, but it's like you're gonna suffer abuse, you'll incur injury, and they will not like you very much if you try to correct them. But it says if you bring the same thing, the same correction, the same reproof, if you bring that to a wise person, it says they will love you. And they will get wiser. And actually, if you keep doing this, instead of having this relationship where you kind of get abused whenever you do this, they're actually gonna increase in learning. And so in the Hebrew, there's this chiasm, and the way chiasm works in Hebrew poetry is just kind of interesting. It's basically like a few different lines that has like an arrow pointing to one central idea. And so that's what's happening here. You have correction comes to a foolish person, and this foolish person, they reject it and they attack the one who brought it. And correction comes to a wise person, they grow from it and they value the person that brought it. And this kind of is like pointing to the central idea in verse 8. This is the center of the chiasm, and it's just this idea that the real difference is in the heart of the person being corrected. And this is the central idea in verse 8. If you correct a scoffer, they will hate you. But if you correct a wise person, they will love you. So the central difference in the lives of these people is that one person sees correction and critique as a threat to them, and the other person sees it as a gift to them. This is why when one person brings the same thing, they go, this is an enemy. I need to defend myself from this person. And the other person goes, oh, this is a friend. They're bringing me something of great value. And so here's a question. How do you tend to perceive correction and critique, or even like a strong rebuke that might come to you? How do you tend to perceive correction when it comes to you? It could be from a parent, or it could be from a boss. It could be from a coworker, or if you're in school, like someone who's working on a group project with you and they're like, dude, I read you're part of the group project. It was not good. Could be a hand gesture from someone in traffic. There's lots of ways people correct us, right? There's lots of ways. The world, as Proverbs explains it, is that the world is full of instruction. Wisdom is kind of personified as something that's standing on the edge of the streets like a woman who's crying out. So it's this idea that like wisdom and correction and instruction isn't hard to find. It's actually everywhere. The question is just whether we are the kind of people who want it and value it and see it as a gift and seek it out, or whether we actually defend ourselves from it as though we don't need it. And as the book of Proverbs unfolds, how you view correction and how you respond to it, it says this is one of the most defining things about you. One of the most defining things about how your life will go is how you receive critique and correction. And I just want to rip through a bunch of Proverbs here. They're not going to be on the screen, but you can kind of write them down to look at them later. This is Proverbs 1:5. It just says, let the wise hear and increase in learning, and the one who understands, like the wise person, let them obtain guidance. Here's Proverbs 12:1. Whoever loves discipline loves knowledge, but he who hates reproof, or he who hates correction, is stupid. Don't you just love the Proverbs? It's like, hey, if you don't like correction, you're dumb. Proverbs is just like saying it as it is. Proverbs 13:18, poverty and disgrace come to him who ignores instruction. Poverty and disgrace comes to him who ignores instruction. But whoever heeds reproof, or kind of heeds correction, takes notice of it, that person is honored. Proverbs 17:10, this is a pretty intense one. It says, a rebuke goes deeper into a man of understanding than 100 blows into a fool. It's like there's two different kinds of people. One person, you can just bring a single rebuke to them and they're gonna internalize it and receive it and grow from it. And there's another kind of person that you can like physically beat this person, trying to get them to think something, and it just will not get in there. Proverbs 26:12 says this, do you see a man who is wise in his own eyes? There is more hope for a fool than for him. Do you ever feel wise in your own eyes? Here's the question that Proverbs forces us to ask again and again and again when we kind of get these snippets of wisdom put to us, is this question, am I actually a teachable person? And here as we look at the wise, we're presented as, the wise are kind of marked by three things. They're approachable, they're teachable, and they never stop learning. The first is they're approachable. There's this, they're just very easy to approach, right? You don't feel like you're stepping on eggshells around them. That you're not like, I don't know how to say this, but I have to say it in exactly the right way, or they're gonna be frustrated. It's like, no, they love when people come and bring critique to them. So they're just incredibly approachable. The second thing is they're teachable. They don't just kind of hear it and go, oh, I'm willing to listen to everything, but I'm gonna probably disagree with you. No, they're radically teachable. When you bring them correction, they grow from it. They change, they internalize it and actually transform based off of your correction. And the last thing is they never stop learning. Right, this is kind of the last line here. It just says, like, if you have this relationship with them where you're giving them correction, they don't just grow from it once, but they come back and how can I keep growing? How can I keep growing? So someone who has this relationship with wisdom is someone that never plateaus in their life. They never get to a point where they go, this is just the way I think about these things. Nothing's going to change. But they're always in this humble posture of learning so they can keep growing and transforming. So let's look at this first one. The wise are extremely approachable. It says, if you reprove a wise person, they will love you. This is an amazing line. I don't know if you feel this way about it. How many of you have corrected someone and the immediate thing you felt from them is love? I have, actually, multiple times. But here's what I would say. That's not my normal experience. Is that your normal experience? No, normally it's like, I'm gonna have a hard conversation. And we use the word hard because it's gonna be hard, right? It's like, this is gonna be difficult. I'm gonna bring this to this person and there's gonna be something in them that's gonna put me in the category of enemy almost immediately. And I'm gonna have to kind of fight and claw my way to get into their good graces, to convince them I'm really their friend and really love them and really trying to help them. But there's something in people that whenever correction comes up, there's this defense mechanism, right? And the thing that's interesting is we can see that so clearly in our roommates, in our coworkers, in our spouses. But what's interesting is they can see that exact thing just as clearly in us. And so this says, reprove a wise person and they will love you. You know, a wise person is less concerned with how something was said than the possibility it might be true. So a wise person's like, I don't really care so much how you said it. The main concern I have is there some truth in what you said? Is there something that I can grow from this? A foolish person, however, is gonna care way more about how something was said than if it's true. And in my own life, I find that sometimes I act like a wise person, sometimes I act like a foolish person. A wise person, when someone comes to you, it could be a coworker, a spouse, or a boss, and they kind of lay into you, right? You've had this situation before. Like, you're listening to them and you're like, I think like 90% of what you're saying just is not true at all. Like 90% of this is not true at all. But a wise person is able to filter out the chaff and ask the question, what's the 10% that might be true? What's the 10% that is valuable, that there is value here? There's a real message to me as someone that wants to grow and wants to be corrected, who loves correction. What's the 10% that is true? A wise person is able to clear away all the stuff that's not true and find the 10% that is and say, that's it, that's valuable. Thank you for telling me this. A wise person is always the most approachable person in the room. You know what a foolish person does? A foolish person will do this. If 90% of what someone says is true, and 10% isn't, they will focus on the 10% that is not true and use that as a means to disregard all of it. Because they're much more concerned with defending something than they are with becoming something. A wise person is always the most approachable person in the room. A wise person, and you know them, right? Every single person has this experience with a wise person, and they're just approachable. People know if I come to this person and I see them not doing something well, I'm not gonna get banged up in the process of bringing it to them. I'm actually gonna be thanked. This is Proverbs 25:12. It says, like a gold ring or an ornament of gold is a wise reprover to a listening ear. Basically, it's like for the person who's wise, someone who brings kind of wise correction, that person's like, it's like you're bringing me jewelry, like gems. Like it's like you're bringing me something of huge value. And so correction and someone pointing out your flaws to you, Proverbs says again and again, it is one of the most valuable things people can give you. So here's a question. Why do we find ourselves defending ourselves from it so often? And why do we get so frustrated with the messengers that bring these critiques and point out our flaws? Here's the great tension of this passage. I think there's a lot of areas of Proverbs where it says, here's a wise way to live and a foolish way to live, especially if you've grown up in the church or you've been around for a while, you've been reading the Proverbs. A lot of us, I think we come to some of these passages and we go, yeah, there's a foolish way to live and a wise way to live. And I'm noticing, I'm ticking towards some of this wisdom. But I think this is a passage where most of us, if we're honest, we land way closer to the foolish person in this category. And so I want to just ask a couple questions to help pull this out. When was the last time that someone confronted or corrected you about something? I want you to just think about it. Pull it up in your head. You've probably been a little bit mad about it since. Just when was the last time? Could have been at work. Literally could have been in traffic. Just when was the last time someone corrected or confronted you about something? And then here's the second question. What did you find happened in your heart as soon as the correction started to happen? Did you feel frustration or did you feel gratitude for the person bringing it to you? Here's another challenging question. And this isn't something you can do in your head right now. This is something you actually have to go home and do, but here's some great homework for you. I would encourage you to ask your spouse or your roommate or a parent, basically go and find the person that you have the most regular conflict with and ask them, hey, when you're trying to correct me or teach me something, do I make that easy or hard? You could ask them this. When you see something in my life that's not good or is making your life harder, do you feel free to bring it to me or do you feel like it will cost you something if you tell me? Do you feel like you're free to bring me these things or do you kind of walk on eggshells around me if there's something that's not quite right in my life and you know you're supposed to tell me? See, the thing that a lot of us struggle with is Proverbs is giving us a picture of a wise person. But as we're looking at this picture, I think one of the things that's happening is there's this mirror that's kind of exposing something in our own lives. And this thing that's getting exposed is for many of us, when correction comes to us, stronger than our desire to become something is this desire in us to defend something. I was riding in a car with my wife, my beautiful wife, Steffi, the other week. And we're driving on a road trip, and the road trip started like this. This is how the 6-hour road trip started. We get to a 3-way stop, and Steffi's on her phone because when I'm driving, she's on her phone. It's totally fine. She's just on her phone a lot while we drive, and But that's sometimes it's very hard to be on your phone for 6 hours. So anyway, I'm just totally kidding. But so we get to this 3-way stop, and we stop at the stop sign, and there's a car, and it pulls up. And I'm stopped. I've been stopped for like 2-3 seconds. This car comes up, stops, and then I start to go. And then Steffi goes, "What are you doing?" It like yells it, "Ha!" Right? This is the meme, right? It's like when there's a car like 50 feet away, they're like, "Slow down," right? So anyway, Steffi is doing some backseat driving, and it's okay. I love her. And so she yells, right? And she's like, "What are you doing?" And she's like, and I'm like, "What?" She's like, "That was their turn to go." And I'm like, no, it wasn't at all. Like, what are you talking about? And she's like, no, it was. And I'm like, I don't understand this. Like, I'm talking to her. I was like, you were like on your phone, right? Like you were looking at your phone. You're looking down at your phone. And I was driving. I was like watching the road, operating the vehicle, paying attention to there's only 3 stop signs, and I know that I'm supposed to, not go first if I don't stop first. And so I'm like, and I know the rules of the road. So, but just to be clear, you really believe that you, looking down, have a better understanding of when I should have gone than me looking up. And literally she's like, yes, I really do. And I was mad about that for the entire 6 hours of that trip, okay? Like, I kept coming back to it. I kept being like, surely you don't really think that. And the whole time, no, I really do. And I became sinfully angry, we'll just call it. I was just so frustrated. I was like, this is absolutely ridiculous. And, and we just couldn't. I mean, the whole trip, I kept coming back to it. I was just like, it was my right of way. Like, how can you not see this, And I'm really frustrated. And, sometimes when correction comes to you, the other person's totally right and you're totally wrong. In this situation, truly, I am completely right. Steffi's totally wrong. But here's the thing. I got so frustrated with this idea that Steffi was like, correcting my driving. And so I have to ask this question, like, why am I so mad? Like, what's the thing I'm really defending? Like, what's the thing I'm really defending? And at the end of the day, the thing I'm really defending is I'm like, I'm a good driver. I'm competent. I'm not an idiot. I'm not stupid. And there's something in me that felt like that was being attacked, right? I was like, no, I'm not dumb. I know how to drive. And I felt like that thing that felt really important to me, my competence as a driver, was being attacked by my spouse. And so I became frustrated and angry with her when she was attacking me. Now, that's just whatever. That's a story. But listen, whenever you find yourself getting angry, you need to ask yourself the question, what am I actually defending? Because if you're angry with someone, or even this line of like when someone corrects you or reproves you, you kind of hate them. There's this like frustration, this antagonism that rises up, right? That's happening because there's something that you're defending. Now here's the tension of this. If you ask yourself in those moments, what am I defending? Especially when someone brings correction to you. Often the answer is this, is that we're defending a story about ourselves the gospel hasn't told us. We're defending a story about ourselves that we think is very important, that the gospel hasn't told us is true. This is why correction and critique, I think, sometimes feels like a small death. I don't know if you've ever felt this way, but some moments in your life will feel this way. You're in some argument or some conflict with someone at work, and it feels so deep. Like it isn't like a shallow, small thing, like I can just kind of give this up. It's like, no, this really matters. Like this really matters. And I think the reason that criticism or correction sometimes feels like dying a small death is because actually what's being attacked is something that we've allowed to become central to our identity. And here's what I think often the story that is central to our identity that is getting attacked is the story that we are good, we are competent, we are kind, we are skilled, we are right. When someone attacks the idea that you're right, I think a lot of us end up defending that pretty severely. And what's interesting is the more central something is to your life or your identity, the more strongly you will defend it. And so if you find yourself having this like just visceral reaction to some kind of criticism or correction about something in you, it's probably because the thing that feels like it's being attacked is actually incredibly central to your identity. And so here's the question for you. When you ask this question, what am I defending? It's this mirror into the thing that's actually kind of moved towards the center of your soul. Something that feels very, very important for you that cannot be attacked. Here's one of the things the gospel's trying to do. It's trying to replace the story at the center of your soul. And in order to be people of wisdom, in order to be people who actually, when correction comes to us, we value it and we receive it and pull it in instead of defend ourselves from it, we actually need to have a deeper story at the center of our being. What the gospel is trying to do is replace the story at the center of us that is, I am right, I am good, I am enough, with a better story. And the better story is that I might not be right, I might not be good, I might not be enough, but I'm loved. And that is a better story. You see, on the cross, Jesus does something that's actually totally profound and totally wild. Every single religion basically comes to people like us, and it basically says, hey, to the extent that you're performing, to the extent that you're good, to the extent that you are right, there's this kind of outflow of love from the heart of God to you, right? This is religion, and this is why religion is based off of laws and commandments and performance. And this is why so many people, when they walk into church, it's really primarily an exercise of trying to shape ourselves, mold ourselves, box ourselves into whatever the person's supposed to look like that's a good, right person that God will love. Jesus, on the other hand, comes down and he says something totally and radically different. He says, oh, actually, I hate to tell you, but no matter how much you shapeshift, you're never going to fit that box. No matter how much you try to follow these laws, you're never going to do it perfectly. And actually, no matter how much you work on yourself, you cannot become the person that is right. You actually, just in and of yourself, are wrong. And that's the hard truth of the gospel, right? When you come and you read the Bible, that's one of the very first things it says. It says, hey, you who cares so much about being right, you're wrong. And you're like, well, that's tough because I built so much of my identity about being right. I don't want to be seen as an unkind person. I deeply, deeply care that I'm a kind person. I deeply, deeply care that I'm a just person. I deeply care that I'm a moral person. I'm a loving person. I really, really care that I'm a good, right person. And the gospel comes to us and says, I hate to tell you, but you're not. You have this thing in you called sin, and it means that even the things that you do that feel moral or good or for other people, it's some weird way that's really for yourself. Right? The reason that you're generous, you can tie that back to there's something in me that wants to be seen as a generous person. So much of our morality is really performance to try to build an identity for ourselves that we are good people. And the gospel comes to us and it puts its finger on that and says, there's something deeply wrong with you. Deeply wrong. Not just in your outward actions at the depth of your heart. But then it says something profound. It says, God knows that. He knows it so much deeper than you know it. And some of us know it pretty deep. Some of us, you're in tune enough with yourself to know, I know there's something radically wrong with me. I feel that way all the time. There's something radically wrong with my heart. But the gospel comes to us and it says, and yet God knows that. He sees you to the very depth of who you are, and yet he loves you exactly as you are. And he chose to come down from heaven, to get on a cross, and to actually pay the debt that we owed through our sins, so that we could receive mercy and grace over our lives instead of whatever kind of judgment we should receive based off of our moral performance. There's this passage in Philippians 3, and a lot of you know it, but I want to read it because this is the Apostle Paul. He's talking about his experience of being someone who goes from kind of having this life built on his own goodness and performance, meeting Jesus and having this life change where he goes, my life is no longer about my goodness, it's about his grace to me. So this is Philippians 3. And I want to just read this to you because Paul, his entire life was turned upside down. He was a Pharisee. He was a religious, moral person, a churchgoer. He was like the righteous, holy person you'd think of when you think of who's the best person at church. Paul was that person. But he met Jesus on the road to Damascus, and his entire life turned upside down. And this is how he says it. He says this. He says, for we are the circumcision. This is Philippians 3:3, which I realize is a hard way to enter into this passage. Okay. For we are the circumcision. Let's just skip that out. Okay. Who worship by the Spirit of God and glory in Jesus Christ. And listen, he says, and put no confidence in the flesh. So he's like, we're doing something with Jesus where there's no confidence we're putting in ourselves, in our own morality, our own righteousness. There's no confidence in us. But then he says this in verse 4, he says, though I myself have reason for confidence in the flesh, if anyone thinks they have reason for confidence in themselves, he says, I have more. And then he lists out this whole set of spiritual accolades. He says, well, I was circumcised on the 8th day, of the people of Israel, of the tribe of Benjamin, a Hebrew of Hebrews, as to the law, a Pharisee, like this really devout follower of the law. As to the law, blameless. But then listen to what he says in verse 7. He says, but whatever gain I had, I counted as loss for the sake of Christ. Indeed, I count everything as loss for the surpassing worth of knowing Christ Jesus my Lord. For his sake, I've suffered a loss of all things. I count them as rubbish, in order that I may gain Christ, be found in him. Now listen, not having a righteousness of my own that comes from the law, but that which comes through faith in Christ. The righteousness from God that depends on faith. So here's what Paul is saying. He's saying this: I started my life as a pretty normal human being, focused on myself, my performance, my goodness, my rightness, and that had a tremendous value to me. It was so important. I devoted my whole life to it. I was a Pharisee. I really believed in being a right, good person, and I, according to the law, was blameless. Like, you could go through my life with a fine-toothed comb, and you would just be like, this dude's life is incredible. And then he says, when I met Jesus, something radically changed. I found there was something better to put as an identity, a central thing in my life than my own goodness. And it was actually the righteousness of Christ, the love of Christ, the grace of Christ, the mercy of Christ given to me from him, not based on my performance. And so Paul has this radical transformation where he's this religious person who really cares about their goodness, defending all the time any critiques or correction that would come to him, because he goes, no, I'm good, I'm right. And it's very interesting, after Paul has this encounter with Jesus, in 1 Timothy, it's towards the very end of his life, he's writing to this young pastor, and he says, Timothy, I'm telling you something that's absolutely true. I'm the chief of all sinners. Like, he's saying, I'm the most sinful person I know. Like, I'm so broken. I'm so aware of my sin. I'm so aware of my flaws and failures. Like, I so need correction. You see, something totally changed at the center of his being. Is that at the center of his being, he said, I now have an identity that is stronger and more secure for me than my own goodness, and it's actually the love of God for me. Here's one of the primary differences between a wise person and a foolish person. A wise person is living from an identity that is totally secure, totally safe. And so when you come to a wise person, you say, hey, you're wrong. They go, I probably am. I probably am. Like, the Gospels came to me and said, I'm broken, I'm a sinner, I'm in need of grace. Like, I am sick and I need a healer. And so if you're coming to me and you're saying, hey, you're wrong, I'm gonna be like, that's the story the gospel told me. That's the very first thing I had to agree with. I had to repent. I had to basically agree with Jesus. I am wrong. I am flawed. I am broken. I am in need of saving. And so when you come to me and say, hey, you're probably wrong about this, I'm gonna say, hey, you're probably right. Because the gospel, that's the first thing it told me, was that I'm probably wrong. And if you see that, yeah, you might be right. Wise people, there's this security in them so that when you say they're wrong, they don't have to defend their identity, because their identity isn't in their goodness, it's in the grace of Jesus. It's in the love of Jesus. And so here's the first thing the gospel does, is it actually gives you the freedom to be wrong. And I know that might not sound revolutionary, but that is a revolutionary idea. The gospel is not saying, hey, now as a Christian, it is not okay for you to be wrong. It actually says, no, as a Christian, one of the central parts of your identity is that you are wrong and you are broken. And that's not something that disqualifies you from this community. It's actually the thing that qualifies you to be part of it. And so there's this amazing thing that happens in a Christian community where the thing that most of the rest of the world spends their time defending themselves against, all of a sudden Christians are free to actually receive as valuable. When you critique me and tell me I'm not that good of a leader, or my communication stinks, or I don't text people back very well, I'm gonna say, man, you're right. You're right. There's so many things about my leadership that are broken. Like, even last night, like, I'm texting with Andrew and he's like, hey, the way you said this, I don't know, was that helpful? And I'm like, why can't you just see me as a good leader, right? And it's like, there's two ways you can go, right? One is like, I'm frustrated with this. The other is you can just be like, you're probably right. This is awesome. I have like some correction, some instruction. I can grab that, value it, and become a different kind of person. So the first thing the gospel does is it gives you the freedom to actually be wrong. And here's the second thing it does. It gives you the power to change. Because here's the other thing. The reason that foolish people have this deep-seated insecurity, it's not just because they believe they're right, they're defending that. It's because when you point out something that's wrong about them, they don't know if it's possible for them to change. And when something that you're like, I don't know if this can change. I think this is maybe who I am. I think this is baked in. I think this is just what it is. When someone points that out, you go, it doesn't feel like you're saying change. It feels like you're saying, I am wrong in my personhood. And so here's one of the things the gospel does, is it gives you the power to actually change. It's okay that you're wrong because you're loved. And it is okay for you to have something pointed out that you need to change because you actually can. Jesus comes and dies on a cross not just so you can be loved as you are, it's so that he can actually give you his life and his power and his spirit so that you can actually be transformed. And so these are the two things I think foolish people tend to believe is it's not okay for me to be wrong, and so you defend yourself actually from the transformation that Jesus bought and paid to bring to you. And so here's one of the things I want to say. Do not defend yourself from the very thing that Jesus died to give you, is transformation. So foolish people have a deep insecurity. Wise people have a deep security. Listen, if your sense of worth is rooted in being smart and good and competent and kind, then correction doesn't just feel like help, it's gonna feel like betrayal. And some of you actually have like a wrong view of some people who brought correction to you because you just have viewed that as like an attack against your personhood, not as help. And I just wanna encourage you, if there's someone that's like you have conflict with purely because they're just trying to correct you, you should be like, that's on me. Like, I'm sorry. I wanna become a wise person. Keep the correction coming. Maybe tweak a little bit how you say it, but I'm here for the value of it. But if your identity is rooted in the gospel, correction doesn't threaten your worth, it actually refines it. Here's something I've been thinking about, this phrase. You are loved enough to be wrong and you're safe enough to admit it. I just think this is one of the most beautiful things about the gospel. You're loved enough to be wrong, you're safe enough to admit it. Being wrong doesn't endanger us because we're held by something stronger than being right. We're held by the love and grace of God. So here's what I believe deeply. If you look around at social media and the world and traffic and your classes and your home life, and you just look at the world, one of the most consistent themes across our culture is that there is this profound lack of humility that has led to a profound lack of teachability. People can be taught almost nothing today, almost nothing. And almost everything about our algorithms are set to just further reinforce what we already believe. Like, I mean, that's happening on your phone. Like every single day, all of these multi-billion-dollar companies are like further reinforcing your belief that you are wise and smart and you see things correctly. Right? And we're getting worse and worse about listening to the other side of things, investigating things truly, and being humble enough to just be like, I was wrong on that. Man, I used to think that. I think I was wrong. Someone corrected my thinking and I have changed. That's just becoming something we do less and less and less today because we're less and less humble. I think Treeline Church, if we're people that internalize the gospel, we actually believe we have a new identity to live from, and we actually become radically humble, teachable people who are easy to correct. I actually think that could be one of the things that sets us apart in this world. It could be one of the things that your coworkers just go like, this is crazy. Every single other time I correct another coworker, immediate conflict, I correct this person, they wrote me a card and said, thank you. That's crazy. You're like, what do they have? What kind of like internal security do they have that they don't feel like condemned by that or frustrated by that? They just loved me for pointing it out. I really think this is one of the things that isn't just gonna help you grow, help us become the kind of church we want. I actually think it's gonna be one of the things that could radically set us apart in this community. So be a humble learner. Those who are scoffers, when you rebuke them, they will hate you, but the wise will love you for it. What if you became the most approachable person in the room? Whatever room you're in, you said, that's my vision. I want to be the most approachable, the most teachable person in this room because Jesus Christ has freed me from this identity that I'm a good person. He's actually told me I'm not. And yet he said, even though that's true, I'm loved to the very depth of who I am, therefore I'm safe. And he wants to continue transforming me. Let me pray. Jesus, I read these texts and God, it's hard. I think there's so much that is still in me that when correction comes, God, I sometimes just feel attacked and I defend myself instead of living a wise life. And God, there's actually a wise way to think about correction. There's a wise way to respond to correction. And God, one of the things that just reveals in our hearts is that we have so much of our identity still in what we do and how we live and how we're perceived more than the story you've written over our lives that we are loved and we are safe in your arms. And so, Jesus, I pray that you would help us become people who deeply believe the story you've written over us, that would be the story at the center of our souls. And would you help us become radically teachable people? God, please keep us from this thing in us that would defend us from the kind of transformation you're actually trying to bring into our lives. God, would you keep us from being these proud people that care more about how a criticism comes than the actual truth that might be in it? Would you just allow us to be like, man, if this is the most unhelpful way you could have said this, but I want to grow so bad. I want to be transformed so bad. I so believe in God's power to transform me. I'm going to find that 10% and just be a radically teachable person. I want to change because Jesus has died on the cross to help me become more like him. God, would you help us believe the gospel in a deeper way and change because of it? In your name.